is how much new snow is there, whether it's from precipitation or from wind loading. And as I understand, is it true that wind loading can put more new snow on one aspect faster than precipitation itself?
Yes, wind loading, the transport of, you can have like a huge flat open slope with a steep slope on one side, and if the wind is blowing across that slope, it's going to take all the snow, all the soft loose snow that's on that slope, and put it into kind of one consolidated spot. So the wind is a really effective way of loading a slope with more mass or new snow and producing avalanches.
So if there's a lot of new snow in an area, does that make it more or less dangerous for me to ski or snowboard on?
Well, if there's new snow, it makes it more enjoyable to ski and snowboard on for sure. And whether it's more dangerous or not really depends on what's underneath. You have to know, and that's where you kind of go into that snowpack part of the avalanche triad. You have to know what's underneath that snow to see whether you have avalanche potential. Your interest in the new snow is the precipitation or the wind loading those weak layers in the snowpack fast enough to produce an avalanche.
So when we're talking about snowpack, what is the overview that you look at for snowpack?
Well, for us writing regional scale forecasts, it's a little different than if you're looking at trying to figure out if your route through the mountains is safe. But basically what you want to look for in the snowpack are the three components of an avalanche. You need a slab, some hard layer of snow, doesn't have to be super hard, but a consolidated layer of snow resting over a weak layer, something that's going to break, resting over a bed surface for something to slide. And if you have those three components in the avalanche, or in the snowpack, you have the ingredients for an avalanche, and you're really just looking for a trigger. That trigger could be a backcountry traveler, it could be a weather event like wind loading or precipitation. One of the things that you have in your list of questions is why a layered snowpack is important, and that's important because we tend to see slab avalanches break on the layers of those interfaces. And so if you have constant shedding on very steep terrain and you don't build up a layered snowpack, you can't have things break off at those interfaces. The only interface you have is really the ground.
So we always have depth tour in Colorado, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
You know, so it's like every time you go out, you're like this. But we all still go out in Colorado. So when is it that depth tour is less volatile?
Well, there's a lot of different situations that could create a time when you can travel safely over structural weaknesses in the snowpack. Some of that has to do with the snowpack and the weather, but a lot of it has to do with the people. One of the things you want to remember is that you have to assess your own tolerance for risk. And if you want to be guaranteed that you're not going to get caught in an avalanche, you don't want to travel on slope that's on a 35 or steeper degree slope that has a structural weakness in it.
Mm-hmm. So we're talking a little bit here about terrain and whatnot, and we're talking about the slope. Generally, it's 30 to 45. Is that the range?
Yeah, it depends a little bit, but we don't see very many avalanches on slopes less steep than 30 degrees. You certainly can, and you can trigger avalanches on slopes that are a shallower angle than 30 degrees. But most of the avalanches that we see are between 30 and 50 degree slopes, give or take a little bit.
I see. And 38 degrees, that's the magic number for causing an avalanche, if you want to cause an avalanche.
Well, that's the top of the bell curve.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And so why is it that when you start getting on much steeper terrain, it doesn't slide more often?
Well, it depends again on your snow climate. So we're really talking about Colorado, but in Colorado, typically when we get onto very steep terrain, as the snowstorms come in, the precipitation, the snow that falls on that terrain kind of sloughs off in these loose snow avalanches. And so we don't really build up a snowpack, a thick layered structure on those very steep slopes.
Makes sense. And so since it's always coming off, you don't have a big event where it all comes down.
That's right. You also need to remember that there's dry slab avalanches and wet slab avalanches, and so those are a little different animals.
So what's the difference as it relates to us out there? I mean, isn't a slab just a slab to us, and it's going to take us down either way? I mean,
if you get crushed by one, it doesn't really matter if it's wet or dry. But what matters is that how you can avoid getting crushed in one. That depends on whether it's wet or dry. And so
what can I do?
Well, the first thing you can do is read the forecast and get some idea of what we're worried about in terms of wet snow or dry snow avalanches. For dry snow avalanches, kind of all the things you're probably going to be talking about in this course in terms of recognizing signs of instability, those are all very important. For wet snow avalanches, instead of seeing this increase in danger over the course of days and weeks, we see it over the course of 24 hours. So in the afternoon, after the sun's been heating up for a long time, the avalanche danger climbs, and then overnight, if you have really cold temperatures, it freezes solid, and the avalanche danger decreases. We can kind of see that peak and valley every day. So what you want to do for forecasting is you want to make sure that you're getting that hard freeze at night. You can watch the weather stations, you can look at the weather, and try to get an idea of whether the snow is really freezing up solid overnight, because then in the morning, you've got a nice surface to run on and fairly safe conditions. Then you also want to make sure that you're doing all your backcountry travel in avalanche terrain in the morning. You want to get up early, accomplish your goals, and be back down by the car, probably by noon or maybe earlier, depending on the day. And the weather, watching the weather and figuring out how the snow's going to heat up and then how it's going to cool back down, that's going to tell you kind of how much time you have to move through the hills.
There's a variety of different types of avalanches, but are we only concerned about slab avalanches here in Colorado?
No, you always have to be worried about loose snow avalanches as well. Most loose snow avalanches are not very big, and so if they push you over and into a tree well, they push you over a cliff, they push you into rocks or obstacles, they can be dangerous. But for the most part, the slab avalanches are really the most dangerous. Slough avalanches would be much more dangerous, say, if you're doing alpine climbing or something, where getting pushed off of the slope is going to be life-threatening.
Like being pushed over a rock band or into a stand of trees.
Yeah, or if you're climbing just even to get separated from the face. If they push you into a gully, any kind of terrain trap, really, where a small avalanche is going to be very dangerous because of the terrain you're in. Then you need to worry about loose snow avalanches. And in some years, like this year, early on, we would actually get loose snow avalanches in the depth hoar, which can be kind of disconcerting and potentially dangerous because the whole slope kind of caves away from you.
Right.
But the ones that kill people the most of the time and the ones that are the most damaging are slab avalanches, because they have so much mass.
So they have that mass, they produce the trauma, they can produce trauma, they can bury you more easily.
They can bury you, they
all
can crush
around.
you, all of those things. The slough avalanche, it can produce trauma if it pushes you into a stand of trees. But otherwise, it's not as much of an issue.
So what are the common terrain traps that people are being hurt in?
Gullies. Gullies are a really common one, because especially if you get both sides of the gully to slide, or a lot of times you can have very shallow avalanches over a large face of a gully. I always avoid gullies. Trees, getting pushed into trees, getting pushed into rocks, getting pushed over cliff bands or over rocks. These are all kind of your common terrain traps. It doesn't have to be very dense trees. I mean, if there's one tree and it wraps you around that can be a problem. But most of the time, it's kind of getting strained through, kind of large strain.